Dragonball cosmology. Now, before we go on, please do subscribe, turn on the post notifications if you're a Dragon Ball fan. Check the playlist, you would love the contents here. And for you to even click on these video shows you want to know, you have a level of interest. And so you should subscribe if you like what I put out for you. And also check the other ones. You'll be getting a lot more great content in the future. And without further ado, let's dive in.
And your girl turning by when I'm would be hit me up, yeah. Double cup, light me up, yeah. I don't serve, but I buy, so I'm loved, yeah. And your girl turning by when I'm gone, yeah.
The first thing I will be addressing as quickly as possible is the fact that there aren't just 4 galaxies in the multiverse. Constantly in the universe, as constantly over and over, we have seen multitudes of galaxies in the series a lot of times, especially in Dragon Ball Super. In the official Zeno 7, it is stated that there are 4 quadrants in a universe, which is used as a general term of spatial-temporal constructs, even sometimes a space-time with multiverses in several instances of other verses. It is still called a universe, but just one that embodies other cosmic structures of a higher dimensional construct, but could also not be a higher construct. Just depends on the lore and evidence. In fact, the term universe is a multi-celestial purpose term used to govern constellation of celestial bodies, despite finite or infinite. And in this context, each quadrant contains an infinite amount of galaxies, which would simply imply that for each quadrant, there is an infinite 3-dimensional construct. And now, because 4 quadrants are infinite 3D, it does not make them totally 4D. In fact, the gap between infinite 3D and 4D is simply means 4D is still infinitely above infinite 3D, and infinite 3D is infinitely above 3D, which the higher views the lower is literally 0-dimensional, despite it just being the immediate lower tier. It gets a lot more complex than this if you go deeper, and that's why versus battle wiki tiering is retarded, because some people will go ahead and call this a universal plus cosmos, making it 4D, which is wrong. Also, I wonder how people never noticed these arguments, but for the people out there yelling, the Earth is stated to be at the edge of the universe, right, which is wrong, and I'll tell you why right now. The first thing here is that the galaxies in size are finite, but there are an infinite amount of these galaxies. 2. Since the planets exist at the edge of the galaxy, as stated quite some time, at least once I remember by Jakku, as you can see in the scans, right, and Bulma, I think, it just means the universe is infinitely expanding, and something infinitely expanding still has an edge, but a continuous stretching one. It is like saying because something starts from point A and stretches on infinitely, then the point A therefore is infinite and distanceless. And that's where inaccessible cardinals come into to quantify sets of infinity with spatial temporal variances. And basically what that means is that something started from point A and has this infinite power to stretch for infinity, which means point A still has a finite start, but yet an infinite expanding potential, right? And infinite always has an end, because there's something that no matter how much infinity you cross, you won't get to that thing, and that's how dimensional construct works, and that's the difference between each tier. So let that just sink in, because I don't know why people just go to versus battle wiki and then they don't think. And that's why my tiering system is the best I've seen and are easy for scaling and it's accurate. Also, everything justifies this claim from consistency of the Dezenshius and the direct shown lore from mangas and anime backed up with the mind to just understand it. Now that this is out of the way, let's move on. And before we move on, if you still don't understand dimensional tiering, you can just ask me in the comments. I could just brief you up. I have 2 videos on dimensional tiering, which are really good. By the time this channel grows more and I'm beginning to more known within every community, I think my tiering system will be the new thing that will be used. Because if you use versus battle wiki tiering system to debate me on my tiering system, you will get violated so badly. Before I go on, my rules on tiering is quite different from a very educational or more logical point of view than the one you see on Versus Battle Wiki. And I've said that about 3 times now, and I keep implying it, so go check the tiering videos. But for a general purpose, I would use the other one, but also use mine as well. Realms like Heaven, the Demon Realm, Realm of Spirit and Time, which is the hyperbolic time chamber, are their own fully fledged universes. Now the universe is just the lower portion of the entire macrocosm, and the living world and the other world is the upper portion, and they're their own full-fledged universe is infinitely expanding. The universe is just the upper is just now people think the other world is small, but it is actually equal to the living world in size. It is just perspective when both are infinitely expanding. We state that it takes 3 minutes to go from King Kai's planet to Earth, but it takes 35 minutes to go from Beerus' planet to Earth, making Otherworld at least 12 times larger than the universe. Now, people will start wondering, but how can I use finite multipliers for infinite expanding constructs? And it's not hard. Two things are infinitely expanding, they're kind of relative, but does not mean one cannot be finitely larger. It's like saying somebody is slim and is infinitely tall and keeps on going infinitely tall. And I am fat, right? And I keep on going infinitely wide, right? But yet if you turn the length of the person vertically, right, to match up my own distance, right? I am larger than the person, but we are still infinitely long. Just take that as an example. It's really weird example, but just take that. So it really does not matter. It's 12 times larger, but they're both infinitely expanding. Now, now the Supreme Kai's world is 1/10 the size of the macrocosm. With the other world being 12 times the universe, the macrocosm would be 12 times that as a totality, right? And Supreme Kai's realm would be 2.4 times the size of the universe. There are several realms smaller than the living world and the other world stated and implied to be the size of the universe. So far, the macrocosm is low multiversal, while just the normal universe in the living world is infinite 3D, and the entirety of both the living world and the other place would make it still an infinite 3D construct. But there's a trick here, right? There's a trick here. Now, like I always say, which is true, that no matter the amount of infinity you stack, it won't make you 4D. Now, I'm sure people will be wondering, what about the transformations and all? It really does not matter because the Goku still stacks above that and some other fighters. Now, does this mean the Kai's realm and does this include the Kai's realm except the Kaioshin realm? Does that mean other Kais aren't 4D? Now, does that mean other Kais are in 4D because the Kaioshin realm is literally totally beyond the living world? It isn't an infinite distance, which it doesn't have to be. The way it is said to watch over everything, and we know the universe is continuously expanding, and shows the Kaioshin realm, which is outside both the other world and the living world, is infinitely above the infinite 3D realm, which is a simple statement I am using to explain it, but it is a lot more complex than that. No matter how that universe expands, unless a higher force changes its laws, the Kaioshin realm will forever be beyond it. Other Kaioshin realms within the other world that seems equal to the universes or quadrants are actually also far beyond it, which is obvious because they are above it and not within it. And it is expanding on a surface layer viewpoint. It would be expanding up and down as well, which is infinite expansion in all ramifications. Now, there are logics that would debunk this from Dragon Ball Z, like Snake Way and so on, which is fine, but won't change the hierarchical difference of deity realm and mortal realm. Now, as for me, They're simply 4D because their universe consists of transfinite amounts of 3D concepts, which you will understand as we move on. And there are finite constructs of universal size supposedly meant to still be outside the normal infinite universe, which contains theirs, and that same infinite 3D construct is just a part of the macrocosm, meaning the macrocosm transcends infinite 3D as a whole, which shares a large spatial and temporal construct as a totality, as all are from one timeline of multilinear timelines, making this straight 4D. Plus the other world, plus and there are other universes that are more than two that are isolated, making it low multiversal. Now, this is further justification of the Kai's realm being above as beings and not planes because of contradiction, and that's timelines. The gods have only one linear timeline, which is a singular past and future, while they have access to all possibilities of the past and futures like you act Almighty, but on a far greater scale which views both past and future of infinite possibilities for the mortal across an infinite universe. And I believe it shouldn't be hard to go further as the macrocosm, which are 12, and our low multiversal, which is 40, since they all have their chi's, meaning it is relative, and it all has been stated, the universes are reflections of each other, especially two being a twin set. But the universes themselves are just infinite 3D, and whoever scales to this scale to it's also infinite 3D in AP and existence, which I always tell people that when you know Tiarin and can do cosmology well, you will know why versus battle weak is retarded. Everyone below such power is just multi-galaxy on an unquantifiable scale, which with Dragon Ball multipliers, then you can quantify them. When Goku went to Zeno's palace with Whis and Supreme Kai, it was shown that the macrocosms literally are floating on a podium, which seems odd because two different universes of 12 have different colors, but these all had the same color. And one thing to note is that there should be a larger space-time continuum holding all these 12 universes, and they can't just be open like that in Zeno's palace. What I am saying is imagine when Vados or Whis are moving from one universe to another. They won't be able to just cross the that distance in Zeno's palace for no good reason without even Grand Prix stopping them, which would affect the whole plot and narrative. But instead, the universes we see here, like I implied earlier, is a huge universe, possibly 5D in totality, and nothing is stopping this. As we know in Dragon Ball, literally one universe macrocosm has infinite timelines for past, present, and future, proven further by Infinite Zamasu, and as a whole, the Dragon Ball macrocosm is transfinite, which is what I was hinting on earlier on the infinite 3D stuff of it being beyond infinity from just 3D to infinite 3D and to 4D. 5D construct is 4D spatial and one temporal or parallel worlds, but the other goes perfect in which the macrocosms are already 4D. Then you have a higher dimensional space which can hold possibly infinite amounts of these 4D constructs, which nothing justifies less but just from the fact that there was 18 universes and already there are infinite timelines upon infinite timelines, which each timeline is a macrocosm of its own, which is 4D. So those universes could just be larger universes as an infinite 4D construct instead of 5D actually. Or we could still ignore logic and make few leaps going with consistency and justifying it by Occam's razor and say those are just the universes, which makes zero sense. And the infinite 4D universes I am talking about is those floating things on those podiums, which should make a lot more sense now to you. They even need teleportation to get there. Now, if you guys notice, or is it just me, but under Zeno's realm, like or building like palace, That thing is nothing like what it looks like, to be honest. That is no palace, but a literal realm of its own. Now, under it is a universe way more massive than those infinite 4D macrocosms floating, and this is further proven by when they enter, there is a hallway so long that they had to get teleported again to where Zeno stays. Now, I am using existential tier to rank these universes because by number of universes and all, they're just logically on the infinite scale, in which you can go watch my tiering video to get how infinities work in tiering. If they are 4D existentially, then Zeno is definitely infinite 4D at the very least. And if you look well at where he stays, you can see planets and galaxies just so immensely large. Now, beyond even Zeno's palace, which is in a realm bigger than as many macrocosms, possibly 5D, or let's just keep it at infinite 4D. His realms are very small, like a chessboard, on top of this squid-looking thing. Even beyond that, that is a higher dimensional space which consists of higher dimensional galaxies as large as one can't tell or can we find out. Now, most of us know that the world of void is stated to be infinite with no time nor space. But before this, we already know there is this higher dimensional space beyond even where Zeno stays. There's the squid um looks like an infinite, that the squid even looks like an infinitesimal. Now, the world of void being infinite is actually a mistranslation and translates to eternity, which is a measure of time and not space. Spaces usually span based on starting factor energy that can stretch as long as they can, which means a universe is only as large as its chain reaction energy process in relativity to the time it will stop, which could be infinite or not, just like I actually hinted earlier with the starting point to the ending point of infinite inaccessible cardinals. The world of void is actually this infinite 3D void that the Grand Priest could literally create with his hand and casually to further prove infinite transcendence in the verse. Speaking of infinity, seriously, the amount of local groups in which one time ring set is associated to is just insane. And this is just from one macrocosm that it is infinite. You may be wondering, but World of Void has no time, but yet they claim it does. Dragon Ball doesn't use string theory mostly, but dimensionality planes of existence. In string theory, 4D or 5D has no time or any tier necessarily. The Dragon Ball cosmology has paradox, which is having two timelines cross, which is two Zenos, but yet they didn't affect the time stream, placing them or him easily above higher dimensional infinite time. As I was saying, the void is contained inside a timeline, making it bound by time despite having no time. It having no time is the properties of it being a void and not its dimensionality. And that's why it is the null void, and further explains how they could shake it and Heat could use his time skip, further proving the characters transcend the void as it was stated that they can fight at will, which would be outside the macrocosm, which would further prove something which would be mentioned as we move on. These characters just have higher dimensional existence than the void, or you could simply argue it 4D, but still, of course, bound by higher space, as I mentioned earlier. Any argument you use doesn't spoil anything per se, but solidifies the character's growth in power. The macrocosm contains infinite universes and other realms, which makes it 4D and low multiversal as a totality. Then we know that there are other macrocosms like this and also a larger, possibly infinite dimensional space, which is logical because of transfinite timelines, despite there not being infinite macrocosms shown directly. But each timeline is a representation of a macrocosm within the time stream for each main stream, which is either past, present, or future. So the universe holding the macrocosm is most logically going to be a beyond infinite construct, making it 5D, because it is a higher dimensional space which can possibly hold infinite 4D constructs, which means infinite amounts of those macrocosms. But yet we could just go with the logic of it just being a larger 4D construct with smaller ones within it. Which, like I said earlier, about we using the word void to argue the space being a higher dimensional space of infinite 4D, as a world of void is logically infinite 3D, as we know that there isn't just one larger 4D or 5D construct as Zeno's palace, which is a whole realm. The larger universe thing has been explained earlier, which means for each larger construct that holds whatever macrocosm with infinite timelines that would apply most likely for the other larger universes there or further. Those larger universes could just be that each macrocosm with its own infinite timelines has its own larger constructs than a general one that I implied earlier. But apart from that, the rest of the logic could still imply as I place varying logics to avoid wank, which most likely isn't the case, to be honest. So even as of each macrocosm having its own larger construct will most likely still be 5D or larger 4D constructs, which can contain all the way to high complex multiversal constructs based on a very different logical Turing system, proudly made by me, and actually interprets Turing far easier, to be honest. Then each of those larger universes still is an infinitesimal of the Zeno Palace, which holds a universe under it. When you enter the palace, it seems your body shrinks to a smaller infinite size than the hallway is. So far you need teleportation, and also further proves how small each universe is in comparison, as Goku, Whis, and Supreme Kai actually grew larger than those universes from an obvious perspective point of view. And by the time you get to where Zeno is, via teleportation, you see galaxies in the background, which is just impressive as hell. And even Xenos, when they're playing with literally planets and galaxies, there's this episode where Zeno placed his hand in that thing, and his hand was literally bigger than the entire planet. So this is consistent, which on its own is infinite 4D at this point. Then you move higher to the squid looking thing, which Zeno's realm is a smaller part of it, like the macrocosm, and their larger space, which could be an infinite times larger or smaller, which I'm referring from 4D to 5D, which is transfinite amount. This is different from Zeno's palace because we see it is on top and not within an enclosed isolated larger continuum. And if you guys didn't notice, Zeno's palace was already still smaller than the ground which it stayed on, which is small on top of that squid thing, which is just a larger infinite 4D or 5D construct. Then beyond that is this large universe that one galaxy in the background is so huge that if you Zeno's palace in it and that squid thing in it, both will get misplaced. But it seems like the same place where the Zeno Expo took place, which should be infinite 5D. Now, if you start counting the macrocosms as universal plus and stupidly equate power to existence, you'll end up at least 5D or infinite 5D. And that's all for today. If you found this video informative, please do to like, share, comment, subscribe, and see you all next time. Peace!